Well, hey, everybody, glad to be back with you again. And we have another expert interview. And I'm excited about this because it's a topic that I think that everybody can benefit from. And I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes. And I want to introduce our guest today, Lindsay Pitstick. She is an organizational development strategist and Gallup-certified CliftonStrengths coach who helps organizations unlock performance by aligning people strategy with business strategy. She partners with leadership teams in Dayton, Ohio's Miami Valley region across the country to diagnose structural friction, strengthening hiring and retention practices, and design cultures rooted in how their people are actually wired to think, work, and lead. Using CliftonStrengths framework as a strategic diagnostic tool, Lindsay helps organizations move from personality assumptions to data-informed people decisions, driving clarity, accountability, and sustainable growth. So, welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks. That was a mouthful. Hearing you say it, I'm
It
like,
was a
wow,
lot,
that's a
but you know
lot.
what? It's really, I always like to do the bios because I think it's important for us to really understand where, our guests are coming from, but also just to show how important, kind of what you're doing really is when it comes to not just the thing you do, but the outcomes you're producing, right? And I think that's
Yes.
with the diagnostic tool and everything. Now, to get started, this tool has changed names over the years, right? It
Yes,
was
it
Strength
has.
Finders. Some people might be familiar
Yes.
with.
hmm
When did it change into Clifton Strengths? It's been a little while, hasn't it?
A few years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a few
Uh,
years.
yeah. And so, but kind of before we dive into the topic today of the power of knowing your strengths, tell us a little bit
Mhm.
about your journey and how you even got into this in the first place.
Yeah, I think like most people, it's been a winding road of trial and error and discernment. And okay, well, now what do I do?
Right.
Um, Started out wanting to be a meteorologist, study the weather. And that's what took me to college, but ended up finishing with a reporting TV news degree. Did that for a hot second. And a close friend recognized some things in me that I didn't see in myself and
Mhm.
suggested I explore corporate recruiting. And so that's where I started my journey. And it led me to a passion for helping people discern what's right for them in a career.
Mhm.
And it brought me to the University of Louisville in Kentucky, where I was introduced to this assessment for the first time. A
Okay.
lot of their student development offices and even some of their faculty and staff use the assessment. And so I got to take it and I fell in love. And
Nice.
I thought, this is cool. I'll use it as a consumer because it is very consumer friendly.
Sure.
Uh, and I was like, I never thought I would use it as a business.
Yeah.
But over time, my journey took me to get a master's in higher education. And I've worked in, new student orientation, admissions, career development. And when I look
Mhm.
back at the common thread, it's all about the bookends of that early adulthood where we're
Mhm.
discerning what are we going to do with our lives, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the power of that tool has just continued to be
Mhm.
emphasized for me. So most
Mhm.
recently, here in Dayton, Ohio, I worked for Sinclair Community College for
Mhm.
about 6 years, and through that role, I was able to become certified in the assessment. We used it with some of the schools that we supported, and like many people, the pandemic occurred. So very
Mhm.
quickly, I realized I have more free time than I thought when I'm not socially distracted.
Yeah.
So started playing around with it as a side hustle and felt called to pursue it as a full-time career around January of 24. So it's been a topsy-turvy, twisty road.
Yeah. No, but it's awesome to hear what you're saying. Like you experienced it first as a user, right, back
Yep.
in college, and
hmm
then you started to help students and other organizations through your work at the college,
hmm
and then it's like it's been this progression where you now it's like okay, now I can go out and help people in a variety of industries and settings, which is awesome. So,
hmm
one of the things that I really thought about as I was preparing for this too myself is, in my magnetic leadership system of what I teach the first part that I really focus on is leading yourself and
hmm
then lead others, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of times I think leaders jump to leading others, but I really think that Clifton Strengths and what you learn about yourself is critically important. And then you can start to do that for other people as well. So, you know, kind of dive in and share with us what this tool, like why is it so valuable to leaders and teams to use if it's about leading yourself and others?
That's a really good question. And I think it really comes down to awareness.
Mm,
And the tool creates the space for the luxury of self-reflection. So I I kind of joke all the time, but make the point that I've lived with myself for 38 years. So if I had to describe my nose to you, you would think after 38 years of living with it, I could do it well. I've only been married for 10 years, but my husband could actually tell you what I look like better than I could. I don't get to observe myself, right? I
mm,
don't get to step back and watch myself interact and see how I'm actually being perceived. I am myself. And
mhm,
so much of how I show up is intrinsic and it is my lens. It's the
mhm,
lens I use to perceive everyone else. So if I don't have an awareness of how I'm being perceived and I simply assume people are perceiving me the way I
mhm.
intend to clarify messages. Well, people who don't lead with that might think I just talk too much, right? But if I don't take a moment to zoom out and see, I can see how people could see me that way, then I'm going to be acting on a perception
Mhm.
and an assumption. And we know what assumptions do, right?
Yep.
They're not accurate. And they oftentimes lead to conflict, miscommunication, and
Mhm.
can become resentment, attrition, disgruntled employees, all kinds of things in the workplace that we really don't want. So, as I was preparing for this conversation, I was also thinking the way I often discuss this tool initially is through the lens of what most people are familiar with. So, most people have heard of Myers Briggs, the
Mhm.
gold standard of personality assessment, or DISC. A lot of organizations use the DISC profile as a common language. And that's what these assessments create. It's like, let's get
Mhm.
everybody a common starting point.
Yeah.
So we have the same language. Strengths does that. But when you think about Myers Briggs, for instance, it's macro. There are
Mhm.
16 possible Myers Briggs combinations or types.
Mhm.
The purpose is to put you in a box to make some sense, right? To
Right.
say, okay, well, you're this and I'm this, so this is similar. And this is likely how you show up. Strengths assessment measures 34 areas of natural talent. It is not a type indicator and is in its intent almost just like blow up the box.
Mhm.
It is so nuanced that it says, okay, I'm an ESFJ on Myers Briggs. So how do I extrovert?
Mhm.
Strengths, how do I eat? My E extrovert. How do I
Right.
extrovert? Strengths can then help us articulate what that looks like for me and how my experience is different than yours. So the
Mhm.
likelihood someone has the same top five strengths in the same order as someone else is 1 in 33 million, meaning there is over 33 million different possible combinations of top five strengths
Wow.
compared to 16 Myers-Briggs types. I'm not saying one is better than the other by any means. I'm
Right.
saying they serve different purposes.
Sure. That's
So,
amazing in and of itself, right there, when you're talking about that and how, it's very interesting to your point. Like I love the personality assessments like you're mentioning, but you're right. It's easy for what I've seen at least, and you may have seen this too, where it's almost like people then make excuses for themselves
mhm.
based
Well,
on the
I'm
box
just,
that they're in, right?
mhm,
So it's like, well, I'm just, I'm an ESTJ, so that's just how I am. And it's like,
mhm.
well, yeah, to some level, but the reality is based on our experiences, based on our strengths that you're talking about,
Yep.
how I show up as that ESTJ versus somebody else is going to be completely
Mhm.
different, right? Is
Mhm.
that what you see a lot through bringing these things
Absolutely.
together even?
Absolutely. Just today, I was leading a workshop earlier today, and as you could imagine, especially when it comes to industry, I get to do a lot of work in the nonprofit industry here locally, and you start to see common themes. There are some strengths that show up much more frequently in nonprofits than I've noticed them show
Mm,
up in a for profit or corporate sector. But we cannot assume that because maybe me and someone else have the same strength in our top five, that that functions the same.
mhm,
Um, the output of one's results dovetail. So everything influences the other, and the reports that Gallup produces for users also reflect that. So a
mhm,
lot of the output in the reports for users is personalized to the order, not just that their top five fall into in the intensity of those, but in it takes into consideration their full 34 output because the assessment
mhm.
measures 34 areas of talent. So yeah, it becomes a lot harder to excuse things. I oftentimes talk with teams and leaders about we have all these strengths, right? But depending upon the role we're in, the hat we're wearing, we need to dial some up, dial some down. They aren't all appropriate all the time. And that comes back to awareness to start.
That's really interesting there. And even situational awareness, I would think, would be really important too, right? So not just awareness of who I am or who you are, but what's the situation we're in. I could imagine that would really be important to, like you said, I love that analogy of dialing them up, right? Like, or down
Yes.
if you need to, because like for me, I think we talked offline a while ago was, two of my top five when I took the assessment years ago even was harmony and responsibility. And
Yes.
those two things can collide a lot because I want everybody to be happy and in harmony together, right? But then
Hmm.
I'm also responsible enough that I want everything to get done right and on time. And
Hmm.
sometimes that people just drop the ball, right? So or
Sure.
I even drop the ball. So I can be at odds with myself, I can be at odds with
Yes.
others. But even just those two alone, let alone three more and then 32 more, I mean,
Yep.
I could see where this could get really nuanced. So, with that being
Mhm.
said, as you're doing these workshops and trainings, helping people understand all this, what do you typically, what do you typically see happens with people as they take that assessment and learn those strengths?
On the front end, people are skeptical, which is so typical, right? We're all human.
Hmm.
How is some assessment going to tell me who I am or how I operate? I always say it's not. That's
Yeah.
why I don't want to just look at someone's output and tell someone else who that person is. Like, I need to hear from you and your lived experience and who you are as a human to
Hmm.
understand how these things show up for you.
Hmm.
But what I often see when someone does, and I just said this morning. I've been getting to have these conversations more and more frequently through the years, but for about 15 years on people's results. And I could probably count on one hand how many people I've interacted with who have been like, this is totally off base.
Mm.
So by and large, once people take it, they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, how did it know that?
Right.
Uh, and even more so, what I think is awesome is that people tend to have an aha moment about themselves because
Hmm.
back to this idea that like I'm so close to myself, I don't always see how I
Yeah.
operate or I can't explain it.
Sure.
Sometimes the output gives the user the words to share with others what goes on in their head,
Hmm.
and then that helps bridge the gap in communication, bridge that intention versus perception piece, and that's how the tool helps really begin to dissolve conflict, break down walls, and really encourage and enhance the collaboration
Hmm.
within teams.
So on the flip side of that, what challenges do individuals and teams face when they don't know their strengths?
It does go back to awareness and it goes back to intention and perception because what happens is action is taken based on an assumption, right? If I'm in a team, if I'm leading a team, working one on one with an individual, and I don't have something that can give me this information, I'm operating on how I perceive them acting in the workplace and how I perceive uh, the way they approach work. That's through my lens. That is, again, that's through my strengths lens, through my lived experience. And so I'm simply imposing upon them how I approach things, why I would show up in that way.
Mhm.
When we have, and there are many ways to get here. I am biased that CliftonStrengths is the way. It is what I'm a nerd about. But there are other ways, right? But this empowers people to kind of speak their own truth and speak into the assumptions people have that aren't founded in how someone's operating. And an example I give a lot is related to my marriage. And because these things don't discriminate, right? Like,
Sure.
I am not a totally different person at work than I am at home. I'm the same person, but again, I'm going to have some strengths rise a little bit more intensely if I'm mom Lindsay versus
Yeah.
wife versus facilitator.
Hmm.
So I lead with a strength called communication. It processes out loud. So if I have to figure something out, I got to talk about it first.
Yeah.
Early in my marriage, I would do just that. Go to my husband, I would verbalize my thoughts and then say, "What do you think?" And his response would be, I don't know yet." And initially, my perception of that is, were you not listening? Do you not have an opinion?
Don't you care?
Yes, exactly. You can see how, though,
Hmm.
that is likely rooted in an assumption. Come
Yeah.
to find, he leads with something called intellection. That is an internal processor, has to think about it to figure it out. So if I'm talking and expecting an immediate response, I'm not giving him space to show up at his best.
Mhm.
If I would have given him a heads up, if I would have said, hey, I want to tell you about this, and then maybe later today or tomorrow we can connect on your thoughts, I'm much more likely to get what I need from that and give him the space to be his best. And you can see how that is the kind of thing that can be mirrored in a workplace.
Yeah.
We're in a team meeting. This girl always talks. She doesn't let anybody else talk. She always has something to say. And then there are these other people at the table who they never contribute. They don't say anything in a meeting. It, if we go from this perspective of let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt, how could this be related to strengths? What if as a leader or a meeting facilitator, you really want this individual to share their opinion because you want to know what it is and you want others to hear it? What if you tell them the day before, hey,
Mm.
we have this meeting tomorrow. I wanted to let you know I would love to hear your opinion during that meeting on X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
Just giving them a heads up, you may have a very different outcome. It's not that they're disengaged or don't care. It's that you're empowering them to show up in the way they're wired instead of doing something that feels unnatural.
Mhm. So what I'm hearing you say in that in and of itself from a leadership standpoint is that requires intentionality, right? That requires the leader to not spring things on people or to
Mhm.
assume how everybody's going to participate in a conversation and a decision making process because kind of your point, like I think it's easy for us to go in and assume that everybody's going to process and do things like I do.
Mhm.
Right. So
Mhm.
because I'm like
Mhm.
you, I'm a verbal processor and
Yes.
I have to tell people sometimes, look, I'm just talking things out. Don't
Uh-huh.
take it for my final thoughts or answer. I'm just trying to process it. Right. Whereas, like you
Yes.
said, I always said quiet people scare me, because I'm like, what are they thinking? Right. Like
Yeah, I can't hear their thoughts.
yeah, everybody knows what I'm thinking because I'm talking about it, like,
Yep.
but
Hmm.
more internal processors like your husband, they're chewing on it for a while and then, but they always come out with great answers. I feel like they always come out with
Yes.
great responses, but I've had to learn it took me a long time and I'm still not great at it, but I'm much better today. It took me a
Hmm.
long time to say, you know what, I've got to give them that space and get
Hmm.
and even in a meeting say, hey, Lindsay, what are you thinking over there? Because you haven't said much about this yet. I know you've got some good
Yeah.
thoughts probably, but that took a long time for me as a leader to really be mindful of that and aware of that.
Hmm.
So with that being said, like once people learn their strengths, they go through this assessment. What do you do? Like, what's next for them? Like, how do you help people really take that next step where this is not just knowledge that they have about
Hmm.
themselves or even others in the group, but
Yeah.
what makes it valuable to them? Like, how do you lead through that?
So often what happens with anything like this, right? Maybe you have a retreat and it's a professional development day, or um, it's just one of your continuing education, whatever it might be. It's kind of like, hey, we did strengths. Like
Hmm.
it's a checkbox. Like we completed the
Right.
assessment, talked about it, and set it aside. Or we completed the assessment and then didn't do anything with it. These are
Hmm.
all common things. And I do want to say, I understand it is a luxury to get to be intentional.
Hmm.
We are all busy. And so
Hmm.
to even be able to carve out time or find like financial resources, whatever the resources
Hmm.
are, to get to do something like this and then unpack it and apply it, that is a luxury in and of itself. But there's power in my preferred approach is first a one-on-one conversation with someone after they've completed it
Hmm.
to simply help them digest the information because a lot of the terms used in the assessment are terms we use every day, so we intuit what they might mean, but Gallup
Right.
has a specific definition, right?
Gotcha.
And so there are nuances. So spending time with that individual first, let's talk through your results. Does this make sense? Does this resonate? Where do you see this show up? Does it help you? Does it get in your way? How do you manage it, etc.? So the
Mhm.
individual reflection piece first, and then in a team setting. So it's helpful to give people the space to first self reflect, but then when you get people in a room who work together or collaborate in some way, partner, and people start to talk about their natural wiring, a few things happen. One thing is that I hear other people own and acknowledge their shortcomings.
Mm,
Like, I don't just think this about them and think they have no clue that they talk so much or whatever
yeah.
it is. I hear them say it. And so that does help say, oh, okay, they know it too. Like they're working on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then um, it also helps affirm things in others. So that's what's cool about these team dynamic type sessions. There's so many things happening at once, but you can hear someone say, just this morning I heard it, XYZ is my strength. I don't see it. Like I don't see it in myself. And then one of their peers says, are you kidding me? Like that's what I count on you for. And
Yeah.
then they talk about all these ways that that person helps them and contributes and adds value, drives the mission forward, whatever it is. So it also helps people just build the confidence to stand in their natural wiring, which is kind of uncomfortable. We're wired or actually coached and told growing up typically like, hey, don't speak too highly of yourself. You don't want to be arrogant, you don't want to brag. So some of this can feel uncomfortable because it feels like I'm tooting my own horn.
Mhm.
But it's helpful to know what you're strong in because I'm probably not.
It's interesting you say that though too, 'cause I heard John Maxwell say years ago, too many people we focus on trying to develop our weaknesses
Yep, yep,
and
yep.
not focusing and leaning into our strengths. And so what I think this can really help people do, just listening to all the things you've even said so far, is once I know those strengths, I can be more intentional with them in my daily operating, at home and
Yes,
at work, right?
yes,
And then what do you say to people though that they're like, okay, well, here's my top five that I see, but and if they know the other ones, right? Because I know there's kind of two different approaches to your top five and
hmm
all
hmm
34.
hmm
What do I do with my bottom five? What do I do with my those that aren't my quote unquote strengths? How do you help
Yeah.
somebody? Do they feel like that's their weaknesses, or is it more like just less of a strength?
What a great question. So, first of all, your point about John Maxwell, that I believe there's actually a John Maxwell quote that I think he's the one who said it that I refer to often. Just this idea that we might be told you should be well rounded, but really we should sharpen our swords in the areas that
Mm,
we're naturally
mm,
wired. And then our teams are what should be well rounded.
gotcha. That's
And
great. Yeah.
so, um, Gallup's data, this assessment's built on 30 plus years of research. And of course,
Mhm.
as the results come in, they're continuing to do
Right.
the research
Compounding.
yeah. But Gallup owns it. They're an international data and research organization. So I trust the
Mhm.
research. And what it says is that you actually have much more potential for growth in your areas of strength, like John Maxwell says, than weakness. But
Mhm.
our standard thing about like HR performance evaluations say, hey, okay, let's look at the past year. What have you done well? What have been your successes? Cool. Where do you need to improve? All right.
Mhm.
So now I want you to write some goals that you're going to focus on for the next 12 months on how you're going to improve your weaknesses.
Mhm.
And of course, I'm exaggerating, right? And I also
Sure.
recognize we're all hired to do a job. And so back to that whole excusing it because it's how I'm wired, I'm not
Right.
giving you that out.
Sure.
But it would help us if we encouraged people maybe what do you need to do better? What are your strengths? What are your natural wiring? How can you use that
Mhm.
to inform and move this goal forward?
Mhm.
So, how can people look at weakness, right? So, you mentioned there are a few different reports you can purchase as a consumer. Um, the least financially, the lowest financial investment is just to see your top five, though the
Mhm.
assessment measures 34.
Mhm.
So, if possible, I would encourage you, if you were to take it, to get the full 34 report. It's going to give you the whole picture. And I'll tell you later a resource I have on my website that helps you
Mhm.
understand it if you just have your top five. That being said, we would assume, right, if I'm looking at the output of a strengths report, a strengths assessment, then the top are my strengths and the bottom are my weaknesses.
Mhm.
Gallup defines weakness as anything that gets in the way of your success.
Mhm.
When we use that as the frame, just because I'm not good at something doesn't mean it's a weakness. It may not matter, period. I'm not
Mhm.
great at soccer, but I'm not trying to get paid to play soccer when I'm facilitating a strengths based workshop.
Right.
So it's not a weakness in that case.
Sure.
Uh, so what's at the bottom are the things that really feel like using your non-dominant hand. And if anybody's worked with
Yeah.
me, I've probably had them write their name with their dominant hand, then switch hands and write it with non-dominant. And it's a very easy way to see what it feels like. When I use a strength, it's automatic. It's
Mhm.
instinctual. I don't even think about it. You tell me to write my name. I'm not asking you what hand to use. I'm picking up a pen or pencil and write my name. Switch hands, do it again. That's a little more awkward. It gives me pause. I must have to take a second to think it through. And I have less confidence, less control, but I can still do it.
Mhm.
And so are the things at the bottom of your full 34 report aren't necessarily weakness unless they get in your way. They're just those things that feel like using your non-dominant hand. When we think about true weakness, where it honestly often shows up is in your strengths.
Mm.
When your strengths get in your way. An
Wow.
example is your empathy, right? Or harmony. You gave that example. You have high
Mhm.
harmony. When high harmony gets in our way, it causes us to avoid conflict.
Mhm.
Harmony wants equilibrium. We want things here.
Yep.
Harmony can sense when things are like this. And it can lie to us and say, if I address this issue, I'm going to make it worse. So I'm going to not talk about it, and that's going to feel better. When in fact, when harmony is at its best and used as a strength, it's a peacemaker, it's a mediator. It helps people see each side and come to compromise so we can get back to equilibrium.
Mhm.
And so we find often weaknesses
Wow.
are in your strengths. It's
Wow.
back to
That
the
is
awareness.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful though, because you're right. It's and I always tell people I'm a recovering people pleaser, and it's like confrontation has been something I've had to work at, and a lot of it's just that internal, like it's that pain inside, like I don't want somebody to feel bad, or I don't want to feel bad about this or whatever.
Yeah.
So you're right. It also made me think about my boys we were laughing about this, that when you're driving, a lot of people who are right-handed still drive with their left hand as their main hand on the
Uh,
steering wheel. And my son was like, I let my weak hand control my safety while I'm driving, right?
yes.
Like he's like, I can't eat with a fork in my left hand, right? But I sure
Mm-hmm.
drive with it all the time. And it's just funny because how we even in that scenario, right? We
Yeah.
use our non-dominant hand in some ways that we wouldn't in other ways. And
Mm.
it's very funny to think about it that way, that that non-dominant hand can actually feel dominant sometimes in the right setting
Yes.
or
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Yep. And it's also, first of all, I'm never going to hold my steering wheel without thinking about that ever again. I will always be like, which hand am I holding this thing with? Uh, but yeah, I mean, that goes back to this idea of like dialing them up or dialing them down and the
Mhm.
power of not just taking the assessment and knowing yourself, but getting to use it in a setting with others who you interact with, because then you can say, okay, this is something that gets in my way, but this is something that's really natural for you. So instead of trying to compensate with my non-dominant hand, what if I just tagged you in? Or what if we
Mhm.
collaborated more?
Yeah.
What if we redistributed some of our responsibilities so that we're both using our strengths a little more often?
Mhm. Mm. That's
Gallup's
good.
data, sorry, Chris, Gallup's data shows not only does that, of course, make us feel better, so it's going to improve well being and employee engagement, but it also has a direct impact on the productivity and profitability of organizations.
Mm. So what I was thinking as you're saying that, so I said, like the way I kind of frame my leadership training is lead yourself, then lead others, then it shifts to building culture
Yes.
and then multiplying your impact.
Mhm.
So as you flow through that, what I'm hearing you say, a lot of this is once teams, once people know their own strengths and they can start to lead themselves better,
Yeah.
then and they know what their coworkers, employees, team members, their strengths are, then they can lead them better. I'm
Mhm.
assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the more knowledge and the more this gets executed, the culture can get healthier and stronger.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
then
Yes.
when I think about the multiplying impact, a lot of what I really talk about with that is that how you're multiplying leadership throughout your organization. So
Hmm.
once you have a healthy culture, then you start to think, okay, how can I scale this? How can I scale leaders and teams? So to me, it feels like if people really work through this process with strengths, that all that side of the process would really be impacted. Is that you want to speak into that at all?
Yeah, a few thoughts. First of all, There are strengths-based organizations, many, that partner with Gallup to do exactly that
Okay.
and using the assessment from the ground up. Southwest Airlines, strengths-based organization.
Okay.
Stryker Medical Device Sales, strengths-based. University of Tennessee, go Vols. They're a strengths-based university. So there's merit to that. And something I've been doing a lot more lately that I think informs that is this idea of comparing it to running diagnostics on your vehicle.
Mm.
So if I know that I'm going to go on a long road trip, I'm probably going to take my vehicle to get an oil change, say, hey, can you like check the tire pressure? Like make sure
Mhm.
everything's rocking and rolling because I don't want to get halfway down the road and then have to call AAA.
Yeah.
If we did that for teams more frequently, and this can be that diagnostic tool, hey, we know this big change is coming. We know we're looking to acquire another organization. We know laws are changing. And so our funding structure is going to shift. We know we just lost three people due to XYZ. We need to fill those roles. What if you took a pause? Use the assessment as a diagnostic tool to say, how do things exist right now? Where
Mhm.
are our friction points? Where are our levers and our leverage points where we could really maximize how things are? And then that really informs what needs to be done. It helps you become much more customized and personalized and intentional in the culture you're creating. And it just helps you be more direct in the path you're going down.
Yeah, that's really good. So this has been excellent. We could talk about this for hours, but I don't want to
I
do
know.
that for yourself or anybody else. I know you just had a workshop today. We got to keep the energy high.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
I'm running low. I'm just kidding.
but what would you say is one key next step you would
Mm.
recommend for our listeners when it comes to exploring their strengths? What is the best next step? And you might also kind of merge what kind of how people can connect with you as well,
Sure.
Lindsay, and how to help themselves and their teams. But what do you say there?
Of course, I would say if you haven't taken it, you should take it. And it's available to consumers. You don't have to work through a coach or consultant. I'm sure, Chris, you have show notes or something where we can
Mhm.
include like a link, right? You can go to
Right.
Gallup's website and purchase access and take it now.
Okay.
Um, that would be the first step, and then read your report. And if I could encourage you to take another step, it would be to engage with someone who is trained in it. I am
Mhm.
one of those people. I am not the only one. You can search for a coach on Gallup's website, but connect with somebody who can help you unpack and digest those nuances of this is what Gallup really means.
Mhm.
And then ultimately share it with someone. And that's where the rubber meets the road. I can learn about myself all day long, but then if I share it with my spouse, with my best friend, with my boss, or my colleague I collaborate with a lot, that's where there begins to be power and momentum. When other people, like I said, can affirm those things in you. And then you start to see the connections between the theory and the application.
Mhm. What would you say to people who do what you're talking about? They go and they listen to this, they go, they take it, they get that insight, but their team or the organization hasn't done it.
Mm.
What happens? Do you ever see anyone when it's kind of like you feel like the lone wolf, and I know what my strengths are based on doing this? What would you advise to people that maybe are in that situation?
Uh, I have a few thoughts. Number one would be it could simply be what I went back to, like the luxury, right? Like maybe you don't, there is not time. Like you guys are in a heavy season of whatever. It's busy season.
Mhm.
There's just not time right now. Maybe there's not the financial resources, or maybe it's that you should you should critically consider if you're in the right place, if this
Mhm.
is something that you value and the people you're working alongside don't. But again, the other two things have to first be considered. Like,
Right.
don't assume if somebody's not engaging with you on this right now that it's because they don't care and they don't value you.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I have very specific examples of individuals really seeing value in this, bringing it to their organization, saying, "Hey, I would love to use this as a conversation piece to start talking about how can we align my role and how can I contribute more?"
Mhm.
And the leader responding with, no, like just do your job. Put your head down, do your job. And that's when you get to ask the question, is that the right environment for me?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what you were looking for, the
No,
best
it's
answer.
great. Yeah. Well, it makes me also think from a leadership standpoint, to think about this from Jim Collins' concept of making sure the right
Mm,
people on the bus and in the right
yes.
seats, right? Because to me, that philosophy that he talked about in Good to Great was so powerful. It
Yep.
was something I'll never forget. I mean, I read that book 20 years ago probably, and
Yep.
it's like when you really understand your strengths and the strengths of your people and your team, it just seems to me that everything's just gonna be so much better. And I
Oh,
think,
absolutely.
but to your point, sometimes we do find ourselves maybe we're not in the same growth-minded organization or team that I want to be in, but from a cultural standpoint,
Hmm.
and it doesn't even make the company or the team a bad place necessarily, right? It just means that
Hmm.
it's misaligned with you. So I like, but you're right. I still think it's value. I think you have to be careful not to push it on people who maybe,
Yes.
they don't understand where that excitement and enthusiasm is coming from. So you kind of have to walk people into why you even took the test and why did you do this yourself? And so
Yep.
maybe kind of slow walk things a little bit could be helpful in the process.
And honestly, I am happy to help people kind of coach them on how to have the conversation if it's
Mhm,
important to them. But an
mhm,
easy way to do it is if you've taken it, provide the copy of your report to whomever you'd like to kind of get them on board and be like, hey, I did this as a self-development kind of thing. I think it might be helpful to you and just understanding how I show up. And so sending it your way if you want to take a look at it.
mhm,
That's where I find the most momentum in my business as I grow is let me
mhm,
just show you.
mhm.
I can tell you all day long, but what if you just experience it for yourself?
Right.
And then people tend to see, wow, I can see how this will help in this area and this will inform this relationship or help us drive this down the road.
Mhm.
So much of it does just come from having the experience. And you're right, not pushing it. That's not usually the best received.
Yeah. Well, sometimes people just get excited, right? And they expect everybody to be as excited. I've had to watch that over the years too, because
Hmm.
I love learning and growing and taking these assessments. And then I'm like, why doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
And I don't consider, right, that they're all the different factors of why they might not even at this time, So, but folks, I really hope
Mm.
you've really learned about, the importance of strengths because I think as a leader, it's so critical to, like I said, if you don't know yourself, you can't lead yourself well. And Clifton Strengths is a one way for sure to help you learn and really see those strengths maybe on paper in a way that you haven't seen it before. And then also when you think about your team and how do we make sure that we're all, using our strengths. I'm not asking the wrong people to do things because that can
Mhm.
happen in misalignment, right? So, Lindsay, thanks so much for your time. And then how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about your services?
Yeah. You can go to my website. It is my business, moxiebynature.com. And you can just complete a little thing to reach out and it'll connect me with you. Or you can email me at lindsay@moxiebynature.com and we'll get connected either in
Did
person or on Zoom.
Did you say, is there something on your website that you said people could utilize or something?
There is, Chris, I'd have to look at my website to tell you. I believe in the
Yeah.
top right hand corner, it's like a contact me kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Okay.
That'll go directly to my email.
Okay. Great. Good deal. Well, thanks again for doing this, and it's great insights. I've got to go back and reread through my top five again at least,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
so, but
Yes.
it's awesome to see somebody that not only knows the tool, but what you do to guide people to really understand and how does it really apply? Because I think that's where some people even can learn these strengths and then they're kind of feeling stuck because they're not real sure what
Right.
to do next. So,
That happens a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, so thanks for giving us your insights, and I think this is excellent.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Chris. It was fun.
Yeah, absolutely.